We pulling?
Hey, I'm Zax, and here's our guide to Mug Z, Heads of Security, the second to last boss in Liberation of Undermine. This guide is brought to you by Wowhead and their raid cheat sheets, which we'll tell you more about right after the boss. Also, big thank you to our supporters on Patreon. Hope you'll enjoy all the Patreon exclusive content we've got coming out this tier, like extended heroic guides and more. Alright, so Mug Z has two phases with an intermission between them. The fight is mostly single target, but there are a couple different adds to cleave every once in a while, and you'll want to save Bloodlust for phase 2. The first thing to know about phase 1 is that the boss has two different modes he can be in that each have entirely different mechanics, and you control which mode he's in by having more of your raid standing in one half of the room or the other, and you have to change his mode every once in a while to prevent him from getting to full energy and wiping the raid. You can start the fight in either mode, but I'd recommend starting on the left side, so have everyone pre-position over there. On pull, and every time the boss changes modes, he casts a short channel that does a bunch of raid-wide damage and leaves a stack of a super long dot on the raid. Then the left side mechanics start. Two of these robot ads spawn in set locations and start doing random raid damage. Stack the boss on the close one and cleave it down, and have the ranged kill the one in the back. Once you get them to 80% health, they take double damage for a few seconds, so you can kill them pretty quick. When these crawler mine ads spawn, they fixate random players and walk toward them, and if anyone touches them, they do damage to that person and apply a raid-wide heal absorb that does dot damage while it's on. The mines are immune to damage, and they eventually become super fast, so to get rid of them, you have to stagger blowing them up so the healers are able to keep up with the absorbs that go on everyone. And you can do this as fast as the healers can handle it, but definitely don't set any off when other mechanics are happening at the same time. On heroic, it's even more important to stagger setting them off, because when each one explodes, it spawns a few of these little circles that have to be soaked, or else they blow up on the raid for a ton of damage. Everybody needs to be looking to make sure these all get soaked. When this big swirly circle goes on a random player, at least 5 players need to help soak it, because it does a bunch of split damage and it explodes on the raid if less than 5 players soak it. It also sets off any mines it hits, so try not to have any in there. And it also leaves a pool of fire on the ground and spawns a volunteer rocketeer ad that jumps around and does damage to random players. So stack the boss on this ad and focus it down to prevent some extra damage. And on heroic, you need to rotate who soaks the big swirly each time it happens, because it leaves a debuff on the soakers that makes them take way more damage from the next one. You should only need to rotate between 2 groups, however you want to split that up. When the boss puts this line on the ground that follows a random player, that player needs to stop moving as soon as possible, because a tank needs to stand in the line in front of them and use a defensive cooldown to mitigate the damage from double whammy shot. The original target takes less damage depending on how much was mitigated, and then gets a circle around them that explodes after a couple seconds, which everyone else should move out of. If the line or the circle on the player hits a mine, they also set it off, so try not to hit any of them. And last thing for this side, when the boss aims this big cone in a random direction, quickly move out of it. It also sets off any mines it hits, but those should all be clear by this point anyway. When the boss starts getting to full energy at like 95, everyone should move over to the other side of the room to get the boss to switch modes and reset his energy. This makes him do another raid-wide damage channel and dot, and then the right side mechanics start. When 2 random players get these swirly circles around them, a lot of things need to happen all at once because this mechanic is a little complicated. How I recommend handling it is make the 2 circles separate from each other so they aren't overlapping but stay kind of close together, and move the boss out of either of the circles. Have about a quarter of your raid help soak each circle with no tanks in either one, and ideally a healer in each one, but you also need a healer to stay out as well. So you have about half of your raid in the soaks and half out, and this should all be assigned before pulling. When the soaks hit, each one spawns a ring of rock walls with a Galagio goon ad inside of it, and the people inside the walls need to quickly kill the ad while dodging the frontal cast it spams and interrupting its pay respects cast. When the ad dies, it casts a knockback on anyone in the walls, which makes them destroy any of the rock walls they collide with, setting them free. And while this is going on, a few players outside the walls get a debuff that gives them slippery feet and puts a little circle on them that pulses damage in the circle, which they should spread out for. On heroic, each of these circle debuffs also spawns an ice spear that launches at the debuffed player after a few seconds, which one-shots them if it hits them. So to avoid this, they need to move behind one of the rock walls to make the spear hit the wall instead. Each wall gets destroyed when it gets hit by a spear, so to avoid having your wall get stolen by someone else and getting one shot, everybody outside the walls should pre-position on the same side of the walls, and then once the spears come out, move to the opposite side of the walls and fan out. The players in the rock walls should also try to get knocked in the same direction away from the other ring so you don't destroy a ton of the walls. When the boss aims this lightning frontal at a random player, they need to stand still and just take the damage, because the frontal follows them and that lets everyone else avoid it. And for the tanks, when the boss casts Molten Gold Knuckles, it does a small frontal at the tank which does big dam and knocks them back, and gives them a debuff that drops these pools of gold on the ground when they move. The tanks need to taunt swap for this, and the tank that gets hit needs to run around to drop all the stacks of the debuff before it times out and they get stunned for 30 seconds. When the boss starts getting close to full energy again at like 95, everyone should move back over to the left side of the room to get the boss to switch modes and reset energy again, and then you just rinse and repeat until the boss gets to 40% health and starts the intermission. In the intermission, the boss casts a combo where he charges to a random marked player and then starts spinning around with frontals coming out of either side of him. The player marked for the charge needs to move close to the boss while everyone else avoids the charge, and then everybody needs to dodge the frontals. He does this combo a few times before finally starting phase 2. This phase is crazy because the boss has both modes active from phase 1, so he does all of those mechanics mixed together. He also gets a big haste buff and there's no way to reset his energy, so you just have to kill him before he hits full energy or else you're dead. Which is why you definitely want to save Bloodlust for this phase. And that's pretty much it. For our recaps this tier, check out the new and improved Wowhead cheat sheets, a quick and easy way to get all of the key info for every boss in Liberation of Undermine, including concise strategies, key assignments, and any pro tips you might need. So check out the cheat sheet link in the description. And thanks again to our supporters on Patreon. We've got a ton of Patreon exclusive content coming this tier, like extended heroic guides, mythic walkthrough guides, and a weekly podcast. So check out that link below. See you next time.